Hello YouTubers, this is my video on how to make a knife. It's not going to be, my interest here is not to so much make videos on how to make knives, because there's so many out there from really good knife makers who've been doing this for years, who've got very good skills. What I thought I would make is a general one, how to make a knife, and put links to those knife makers that I've learned a lot from. And I'll put them down below. Let's see, down there. I'll give you the links. But I thought it would be interesting, since I'm a new knife maker, is to show you how to fix mistakes. And I make a lot of mistakes, and I've learned a few tricks and tips on how to fix some of the mistakes that come about when you're making a knife. But we're going to start off on how to make a knife, and then we'll cover the oopsies later. So when I first started making knives, all I had was a 4x, I think this is a 4x24 inch belt sander. Propped it up on a vise, just like this. And it was just enough to make small knives using some steel from Home Depot. I wouldn't recommend using steel from Home Depot for anything that was functional. But if you want to practice and start out and see if this is something you'd like to do, the steel is very cheap. Or you can just use any steel you have if you happen to have some around. So the belt sander would run, and then I would just grind the knife. I would have a handheld drill with drill bits to cut the hole, using different parts of the belt sander, so I can move around here, different parts of the belt sander to make the shapes, round off the edges, and of course sandpaper, and doing a lot of the work by hand. And you can still make some very nice functional neck knives, everyday carry type knives, self-defense knives, multi-purpose knives, as you see here. Nice little fighting knife, self-defense. Feels really good, comfortable in the hand. Fairly thick, strong, nice convex edge. After making a few of these knives, I thought this is something I would like to do. So I'm going to pause and swing around. Hold on. So as I swung around here, I bought myself a sander. This sander goes for about just over $100 at Lowe's or Home Depot, and it's a little faster. The belt's longer. I think it's a 36-inch belt, 4x36. I don't remember exactly now. With a 6-inch sander on the side. The 6-inch sander is very good. You could get a perfect. You could line it up with a square. I don't have one. I have it over there. I have it over there on the other side of the table. But you can square it off and get nice square edges along the edge of the knife, handles and such. And if you want a good convex grind, what I've done is, if I lift this up, it's stuck. I removed some of the framework here, removed some of the framework there, and now it's got a little flexibility in here, and you could actually get a nice convex edge. The top part here, you can only really get is just a flat grind. And now with this one here, with a 2-inch wheel, you get a different angle for a finger choil. So this was working out for me pretty good, but then to make larger knives it was more challenging. I also damaged the handheld drill when holding the steel by hand, because I was using thicker steel or stronger steel. Once I moved up from the Home Depot steel, which I think is 420 or something, some sort of cheap steel, to CMP3V, which is a much stronger steel, or 440C. So I had to get a drill press. And the drill press here, again from Home Depot, a little more than $100. Works very well. Much safer than holding a piece of steel by hand and the drill in the other, or propping it up in the vise. So use the drill press, and was able to make much better holes more complicated designs. This is a Boker design. It was reviewed by Gafco. When I saw the review, I had to buy myself one, only to find out that the edge on the Bokers was completely dull on the one that I had. I mean, it was terrible. And I thought, hey, why don't I just make my own? So it's their design, Boker design, which I've made a few of these for myself. I haven't sent them out to heat treat. So this is as far as I go now before they get sent out to heat treat. They don't have much of an edge yet, but it's I got a pretty good polish on it up to, I think this is either a 120 or a 220 grit. And when it comes back from heat treat, I just do the finishing touches and put the edge on. If you're wondering how I cut the steel, as I swing around, excuse me for shaking the camera. So then after making a few knives, small ones, I decided I wanted to make larger ones, and I wanted something that works faster than the belt sanders that you get at Home Depot, like the Skill one and this Makita one. Wanted to get something larger. And there were a couple of options. The KMG, which I don't regret buying, it's rather expensive, but it's a beautiful machine. If you want to go a little lower end, there's a Grizzly machine. Uses the same 72 inch, 2 inch by 72 inch belts. There you go, my collection of belts. I haven't thrown a belt out yet because I'm still new at this, so I've got some pretty worn ones there, some that here in the middle that are in use, and some fairly newer ones here. Those are my smaller belts. I think they're 4 by what are they, 24 I think? I haven't thrown any belts yet because I'm still starting out. So that's the equipment that I use. Let's talk about handheld cut-off saw. Let's talk about how we make knives. So if you first get yourself a piece of steel and some ideas as to what you want to make. Of course, your choice of steel will depend on what kind of knife you make, and of course the availability of the steel and the cost. In other words, if you're going to make yourself a machete, something long, you're probably not going to make it out of very thick steel because it's going to be heavy. If you want yourself a nice, very fine slicer to slice, say, vegetables, again, you probably don't want to start off with a very thick piece of steel. You want something thinner. And then what kind of material you're going to cut. If you're going to cut something soft, something hard, you may want to get yourself a stronger piece of steel versus a softer one. And of course there's always that concern about rust. So there's different characteristics of steel, and you need to pick the right one for the job, for the knife you want to make. And once you get your piece of steel, then you can start drawing out either directly on the steel like I have here, or you can make paper cutouts and then apply them to the steel. And I seem to prefer to write right on the steel. Here's one crazy design that I came up with. It's supposed to be a karambit style double blade. It's a crazy design. It's just for fun, just to fool around. As you can see, I've been writing over and over and over again. There's lots of lines and drawings on this because I constantly change my mind exactly how I want this fantasy, if you will, knife to appear, to be when it's done. But the point is, you draw the pattern on the steel, and then the next part is to cut it out. You could use a bandsaw, which I don't have here. You can use a bandsaw to cut it out, or you could use a cut-off saw. And this cut-off saw here from Home Depot or Lowe's is about 40 bucks. Right now it's got more of a grinder or polishing type flap disc. But you could use a cut-off disc. They come in pretty, like 2 sizes, thin and thinner. And this is the thinner type, which is 0.045 of an inch, and it works very well when you want to cut in between the patterns. Also, a tip: when you draw your design on the steel, and you want to make as much use of the steel as possible, you've got to keep in mind your cutting ability. You can't really put the swords too close together because you've got to cut between them, and depending on how thick you are cutting device is, it's going to eliminate that much steel, maybe a little more. Much more when you're making curves. I'm not in the camera. Much more when you're making curves. It makes maybe 3 times, 4 times the thickness when you're actually rounding, when you're cutting around with the cutoff saw. Don't put too much of a curve, because then you'll break and you'll shatter the your disc. You could also use a grinding disc, again from Home Depot. That's about $1.50. You could probably find them cheaper. This is about $3. And once you've cut close to your pattern, you can use a grinding disc to grind down and get it even closer before you use the belt. I would also recommend, if your knife has holes, drill the holes first. It's much easier to secure this piece to a table or a vise when you've got a nice square or large piece of steel to work with, rather than trying to drill this hole in this curve after it's been cut out. So I would recommend drill your holes first. This would also be a hole that you may want to drill first. If you want a perfectly round hole, you might want to drill this out first before removing the rest of the material. Or there's other ways to make that shape, and one would be to grind it out and then to use a 1-inch sanding disc and just put it right in there, and then the 1-inch sanding disc will make a nice perfect hole. Many ways of doing it. There's really no wrong way of doing it. All depends on what tools you have and what you feel comfortable with. So once you've cut out your knife, and I don't have, oh I do. Once you've cut out your knife, let me just get this steel out of the way. Here's one that I've cut out, real rough cut. This is going to be my Japanese tanto, and I still have some of the drawing marks. Once you cut out the knife you want to work with, what you need to do is start polishing up the steel, cleaning up the steel. It's much easier to work with, in my experience, to clean up the steel at this stage. Now, we're not putting a perfect polish on it, okay? We're just taking off that real heavy pitted surface, rusted surface or pitted surface that's on the steel stock that comes in, unless this is what you're looking for. For example, here I kept the pitted surface because I thought it looked pretty cool, gave the little knife some character, and I'm going to polish up the edge along the edges here, polish it up just to give the knife a little character. That's just something that I chose to do. This is a little weird looking everyday carry, kind of like a worn clift or sheep's foot. This was just a design just to make it look cool, lighten up the blade a little bit. Probably look better without it, but thought I'd give it a try, see what it looked like. So anyway, that one is one I want to keep the pitted surface. There might be some knives you want them to have a mirror polish. This is not heat treated, so I'm not there yet with the polish. But you may want to clean it up completely. Here's another one which will not have a scale on it, so this is one I'm going to polish up as much as possible. So you want to clean up your steel first before you start doing the grinds, only because it's easier to do some of the work now. This sword here, along this edge here, right, I've polished up to maybe like a 120 or 220. Over here, I'm going to put some sort of a scale, maybe a Japanese style handle. So some of the pitted surface still exists here, and that's okay because it's going to get covered. But here, I need to clean this up because this is going to be a lot of work later on. And if you want the nice grind lines, it's easier to clean up your steel before you put the grind in. Otherwise, you lose the grind line. So that's just one tip. You may want to start cleaning up your steel again before you start putting in the grind marks and before you start cutting everything out. It's just easier work later on. So here's a view of my workshop. Nice light source. The table's about 4 foot by 8, maybe 4 foot by 10 with all my tools. It looks a little cramped, but it's enough to work with. It's a 1-car garage. I'm only using half of the garage, and it gets dirty after a while. You can see my garage door there with dirt, with some of the dust from the grinding of the iron or the steel. Needs to be swept up every now and then. You also need some safety glasses, gloves, a dust mask. You don't want to be breathing in this dust, especially when you're making the handles. What else can we talk about without actually showing you how to make a knife? Well, like I said, this was just an intro. As I come across oopsies or I slipped up with something, I'll show you how to fix it up, clean it up. Right now I'm not really working on anything new. Haven't decided when I'm going to cut this up. What I'm going to do, I guess I'll put that on video. Some of the knife designs I'll put on a separate video. When using the drill press, 10W40 or just motor oil is good to keep the tip lubed. Minimizes friction. Sometimes when the bit's a little dull, it actually minimizes the cutting ability. So once that tip starts getting dull, if you're not going to sharpen it up, I wouldn't put too much oil because that tip's about to go. It doesn't help. Of course, you need various belts for the KMG. I've got a 10-inch wheel. I've got the fixture with and without the platina. Sorry, platen. I'm going to have to edit that out. You're going to need some clamps. What else? Markers. An angle. So the cost to... You really don't need a KMG. That's an excessive purchase. You could really get started with just a belt sander for like $100, $120 and a drill press and a vise. The vise is like $30. And then some steel just to play around with. $300, including the cut-off saw and some discs, some drill bits. That's pretty much it. Let me show you some of the knife designs that I came up with in another video.